Hey, and welcome to my show today. Nice doing business with you. Today I have Hans Skillrud, who's the co-founder of Termageddon. Termageddon helps you protect your business from fines and lawsuits by creating your privacy policy, terms of service, and other website policies with the most comprehensive privacy policy generator that's on the market today. Hans once ran a 12-person web design agency in the windy city of Chicago for 7 years, so we have lots to talk about there, I'm sure. During that time, he bought an agency and ultimately exited out of that whole business to start Termageddon. He started it with his wife, Donata, who's a privacy attorney who didn't like the monotony of having to write privacy policy after privacy policy for every client. And Hans didn't like figuring out that piece for his agency clients either, which is something that I can relate to and precisely where we've intersected. Because of these pain points, Hans and Donata came up with the idea of Termageddon to offer a comprehensive auto-updating website policy solution at an affordable price. And one thing I didn't mention there in the intro is I want to talk a little bit about your cookie consent tool as well, which is another great feature of Termageddon that our clients have come to love. With that said, I got some questions lined up, and I want to hear a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. Our podcast focuses a lot about how you built and grown your business, but in your case, it's so specific to our audience because most of them have websites or tune in to listen about, growth marketing, that sort of thing. So where do you want to kick it off? You want to give us your life in a nutshell to get us started?
Sure, be happy to. Anything to avoid discussing privacy policies, right? So we'll start there.
Right?
So thanks for that intro, Chris. Yeah, my name is Hans. I think that's a good way to describe myself. I'm an entrepreneur. Since I was a kid, I was always trying to figure out ways to make money and stuff like that. It's funny too. I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like I like building something that I just believe in, and that really matters most. Like I have an effect that helps people, and that's been probably my calling card since day one. I just want to help people out with stuff, and for what it's worth, I used to copy and paste privacy policies whenever my clients would ask me to. Back when I was running my agency, never felt right, but I didn't know any better. And once dating an attorney, she recommended how stupid of an idea that was, and I was like, well, that's very fair, but they're not going to pay your fees. So where can we meet in the middle?
Yeah.
And that's how Termageddon came. And that's the business I've been running for 7 years now. So, these days I really try to just help as many people learn what's going on about these privacy laws, understand how they can address them rather than trying to hide from them. It's probably better to embrace it these days with everything that's going on with small businesses being targeted for non-compliance and stuff like that. So yeah, these days I spend my time, I consider myself a lot more of an educator, just helping people understand what's going on, helping them understand the pros and cons to Termageddon, and just helping people make the right decision for their business.
Yeah, and in your defense, I think a lot of agency owners have gone out and just Google ganked the privacy policies and that sort of thing off the internet because, for example, Google Ads, they require that, and there's tons of templates on there, so you're not just outright stealing. There's free templates available on the agency owners are in the habit of jacking off the internet, but I do think that it's a lot better to customize it to your needs, and that's where Termageddon really excels. So
I think
let's talk
10
a little
years
bit about
ago,
like kind of
oh,
that onboarding. Oh, good. Yeah.
yeah, 10 years ago, I feel like it turns out I don't think I was alone at all. I think everyone was copy and pasting policies off the internet. But, fast forward today where privacy has become much more important. Consumers are wanting these protections, and that's why governments are putting laws in place. So it's just kind of like you kind of grow with the trends in the world. And yeah, privacy is becoming a bigger deal. Probably not a good long-term strategy to copy and paste a legal document for your website and hope for the best.
Yeah, let's just, I think maybe jumping right into the deep end of the pool. Keep hearing about these lawsuits. A couple of years ago, we were chatting a little bit off camera here. It was accessibility lawsuits. And now we're seeing some states like California, I believe Colorado, and there's one other one that's pretty active and progressive in this regard right now, and I know more states coming soon. There's lawyers, kind of like the copyright. They call them copyright trolls. Hopefully, that doesn't offend anybody that's listening. You sometimes will get those emails that you're using an image without permission, and they just have software now to chase images. And even though you licensed it from Adobe stock or whatever, they still come after you, and you have to prove it. And these I don't know if privacy trolls is the right term, but I think that's the term the internet's going to give them. They start chasing people over these things, and they can result in real fines and real lawsuits for real companies.
Yeah,
And as boring as the subject matter can be, as you jokingly said, that tends to get everybody's attention.
it
So
does.
I know you've probably seen some of the worst of the worst. So
I have. Unfortunately, I've had one too many calls. I mean, at the time of this recording, over the last 7 days, I've had 3 more people reach out to us, and they come to us after getting a demand letter asking for $50,000 in damages because they were loading Facebook pixel without getting consent, or
Hmm.
LinkedIn tag without getting consent. And
LinkedIn Pixel.
yep,
Yeah.
LinkedIn Pixel, that's a big one, big one. And they're caught completely dumbfounded. So many of them tell me, I didn't even know I was using this Pixel. That was from an ad campaign from like 3 years ago. And they just never took it off the site. And it just breaks my heart because what's happening here is the SIPA noncompliance, the California Invasion of Privacy Act. But to start there, I do want to take 2 steps backward. Part one, I do want to note everything I share today is not legal advice. It's for informational purposes only. I'm not an attorney. Always speak with your attorney before making a legal decision. And then second, I just want to give like an overview of what even a privacy policy is, because I think so many small business owners, they all tell me the same thing. I don't read it. I just agree and I just move on. And I get that. I'm not denying that that's not a major reality for the vast majority of people. But why do they exist in the first place? So they exist because privacy laws require them to exist. Privacy laws are designed to protect people's data. Your name is your name, your email is your email, your phone number is your phone number. And under privacy laws, governments are regulating that data, meaning that if you as a website owner are collecting data from people of certain areas, you may need to comply with their privacy laws. And that's a very important takeaway, is that your location as a business owner does not matter. What matters is whose data are you collecting and what privacy rights protect them, because it is those laws that you need to comply with. Now, it seems pretty reasonable until you kind of step back and you're like, well, I'm a website owner. My website's available to anyone, anywhere. Yeah, exactly. And therein lies the complexity of privacy laws, which is you may have a simple website, but find out you need to comply with 7 privacy laws, 10 privacy, 50 privacy laws. It's kind of wild. And so, okay, so you need a privacy policy because each privacy law that applies has its own disclosure requirements. So it's pretty simple. Make the disclosures you're required to make under each applicable privacy law. What is problematic and probably a big reason, a motivating factor of why you wanted to bring me on the call today, is what's the trend that's happening right now, resulting in businesses getting into trouble. And multiple privacy laws are utilized to enforce fines and whatnot. But the one that's capturing everyone's attention, in particular in the United States, is the California Invasion of Privacy Act. This is a privacy law written 30 years ago, not even intended for websites. It was intended to prevent Californians from being eavesdropped on phone calls. It's actually a pretty solid law. Like, hey, if you're a Californian, it's illegal for any third party to be secretly listening in on a phone call. Not bad. Like, I can get behind that. Unfortunately, though, with how that law was written, it's basically a communication is what's regulated. Third party communicators can't be like monitoring you until you've given consent. Well, there is a growing number of attorneys that are leveraging that law and visiting websites and then sending demand letters in the mail to these business owners saying, I visited your website and oh my gosh, I'm so offended. You had Facebook pixel tracking me, or LinkedIn ads. There's countless other tracking technologies out there. It's not just these 2. But because of that, I did not consent to that. And because of that, I'm so offended. I need, oh boy, so much money, 50 grand, 60 grand, 27 grand, because of how horribly hurt I am from this. And if you can't tell from my tone, yeah, I think it's trolling. I mean, if you really were that conscious about your privacy, you would download Brave or some other browser that just removes cookies entirely, but you choose not
Yeah.
to. So,
Or you just would use DuckDuckGo or stay off
exactly.
the internet. There's
Yeah.
other ways to conduct business.
Exactly. So yeah, no, there's no doubt in my mind. I think this is the privacy trolls coming after, and oh my gosh, they are some of them are filing a dozen demand letters a day, each one for 60 grand in damages. And
Mhm.
so these
I've
web
seen some of them.
yeah, have you? Okay, yeah, I'm happy to hear that because, well, I'm not happy. I'm sorry that you had to deal with it, but it's very unfortunate. It won't, that will ruin someone's day when receiving something like that. I've had the people who told me about this. Some said that they're going to take them all the way to court. Others have settled for 8 grand, 5 grand, 6 grand. Others
Well,
have,
that's their end game, right? They typically want to settle out of court,
yeah,
correct? I mean,
yes,
they're hoping to scare you into a shakedown, and not to suggest it can't get very real very fast, because it can.
that's
But
true.
that's their hope, is that they're not the one to create the case law to close the loopholes. I would think. I'm also not a lawyer. Whatever the advisory you gave earlier, like, I'd like to repeat that. Not a lawyer, don't play one on TV. Even though we look like we're looking in a mirror.
Yeah, we do.
Hans is, yeah, much more knowledgeable on the subject matter. But I guess to take to I know the logistics of how these things play out. You've seen more of it than I have. From what I saw in the law, and I did take the time to read some of those details. Clearly not at your level. The fine can be from the state as well. Is that correct? Not
Uh,
just these privacy attorneys,
so
like
so
for violation of the law.
Yeah, so for violations, I believe every privacy law outside of every general privacy law. So I'm not talking about HIPAA or FINRA. I'm talking about the broad-reaching GDP, privacy laws out there. The
Yeah.
penalties tend to be fines. So like a government issues you a penalty. SIPA
Right.
is one where they allow private right of action, where they can sue for damages. So that's the unique
Okay.
one. And with
That's the
America being
distinction.
yeah, with America being sue happy, we're seeing obviously a massive amount of these being filed. But California also has CPRA, previously known as CCPA. CPRA is only fines. So if I think it's the California Attorney General, if they determine that you
Okay.
are non-compliant with CPRA, you'll be fined. And CPRA in general terms only applies to bigger businesses, so the fines there are significant. If you are found to be non-compliant.
The threshold for that, I believe, is 25 million a year in revenue. Is that right?
That's one of them. Yeah, you not only have to do business in California and be a for-profit entity, but you have to generate 25 million or more in revenue, process the data of 100,000 or more California consumers, households, or
Okay.
devices, or derive 50% of your revenue from selling the personal information of California consumers. And I think that's good leeway into anyone listening to this, like, oh wow, I don't have to worry about that law. Yeah, that may be the case, but then California has another law called SIPA and another law
SIPA.
called
Yeah.
CalOPA, which can easily apply. That brings me back to a fundamental thought, which is that as a website owner, we have to find out what laws apply to us, because only then can you dictate everything else about your operations while working towards compliance. Find the laws that apply, create a policy with the disclosures under those laws, create a consent solution if you need one. You mentioned Colorado. There's also Virginia and quite a few others. Kentucky and Rhode Island's go into effect in just a few days from the time of this recording.
Yeah, I
So
knew Kentucky was coming down the pipe
that's right.
fast.
Yep, Kentucky, January 1st. It also goes to show you can't just put a policy up and think you're good to go forever. You have to have a strategy to keep up to date with this stuff. And, I'll be the first to say an attorney is the best route to go. Of course, if you can afford an attorney to draft policies, monitor laws for you, keep you up to date, and advise you on a legal advice standpoint, go with that. And when you don't have those funds, Termageddon could be a solid plan B.
I've had the experience of onboarding several of our clients on the Termageddon, and from maybe if you could talk to the listeners or the watchers about the onboarding process, because you kind of hit on it a little bit, where you do first ask them sort of a wizard or questionnaire about their business and how they conduct their business and operations and what they do. That did feel very a weird dichotomy of pointed but also kind of broad to kind of get to the bottom of like what laws apply and what their policies need to say. I'm
Yes.
maybe overselling it for you, but can you talk about that? Because I noticed that when we onboarded, that we had to go through this questionnaire, and I'll be honest, at first I was like, oh, instant gratification society, right? I'm like, this is a pain in the ass. This is going to take me longer than I thought. I thought I was going to click a few buttons and it was going to spit out my policy. And it wasn't that bad. Like it was maybe 20 or 30 minutes. And some of
Yeah.
the questions I had to go Google things and ask
Yeah.
ChatGPT and Claude some questions. But tell me how you developed that, because that's kind of, it feels like your secret sauce, right? Part of this is, and what I want people to get out of this when they listen is, this is really important. If you operate a website or you work at a business that has a website, which that's probably most of us, and you don't have a privacy policy and probably cookie consent, you might fall victim to one of these privacy trolls. But
Yeah.
but secondly, I want to learn a little bit about how you built the engine and how Termageddon's growing, because to create unique or semi-unique privacy policies for people at scale is an interesting undertaking.
Yeah, it's quite the undertaking, and I'm pleased to let anyone know listening that I am not the one who built that. It was my much smarter, much more put together wife. So my wife is a licensed attorney, and she engineered the entire system of Termageddon. And I'll go into explanation of what that is, but I do want to note, Termageddon's a tool, so we are a software tool. We're not a legal service provider. So we are attorney founded, but it's just to help make sure we have an excellent software tool. So the way our tool works is that when you register an account, you purchase a subscription. It's $12 a month, or if you want to save annually, you sign up for the 119 a year plan. And you get a full set of policies and a consent tool for your website. But we don't just like, oh, you paid us money, so here you go. That's not really how we view things. Like, we view things as you're either compliant or you're not. And so we take our customers through a series of questions, and it all starts with, let's find out the laws that apply. Because once we find out the laws that apply, our tool then looks, we already have it all defined behind the scenes, but what are the exact disclosures this person has to make under these applicable laws? So when you go through the questionnaire, you're going to find yourself probably, be like, oh, how do I best answer this? And we have a little thing called Termageddon on the side where you can play a video and I, talk to you and share thoughts. But ultimately, you have to answer truthfully, don't lie. Like for the question, do you sell the information you collect? Don't say yes if you know it's no, but so long as you just be conscious, take the time. I know policies are boring, but just take the time to understand it, because we ask each question on purpose. A really good example is like when you're filling out your business information. What is the name of your legal business? What type of legal entity it is? The moment if you're a nonprofit, you select nonprofit, your questionnaire is already changed. All the subsequent following questions will be different because not all privacy laws, for example, apply to nonprofits. So our tool is all about, first and foremost, finding out the laws that apply and then adjusting and asking the questions necessary to make the respective disclosures under those laws. And now after you generate your policies, that's when you copy and paste our codes into the body of your policy pages and then, confirm they all work and everything like that. But if you have an attorney, for example, who wants to review everything, they have full customization abilities. We're actually very attorney friendly. We even have a law firm partner program. So that's great too. You have full customization abilities as an attorney, or just anyone for that matter. So
That's great to know. Being that your wife is a privacy attorney by background, just for rough perspective, obviously, if you talk to 10 different law firms or 10 different web designers, you get 10 different prices. What is a typical custom privacy policy cost from what you've seen? Like maybe average range, if you had to guess.
So yeah, I'd lump this into two groups. I think there's a group of attorneys out there who think, oh, I need to write a privacy policy for the privacy law in my jurisdiction. Those tend to be like $4,000, I would say, in this day and age, maybe $6,000, maybe $8,000. I don't know, somewhere around there. What's problematic about that approach is that, obviously, take your attorney's advice. I'm not speaking, take your attorney's advice. But I would say most privacy attorneys consider privacy laws to protect people and not care where your business is located. So I feel like the right way to approach things as a privacy attorney is, the first thing they should say is, what laws apply to you? And the client will say, I have no idea. So the first step will be the attorney figuring out what laws apply to you. So that I would imagine there'll be a cost there. And then once determining the amount of laws that apply, determining a quote to review all those laws, determine what you specifically need to make. I have had customers come to us that were quoted $60,000 to $120,000 with like a 6 to 8 month turnaround time for something like that. Many of them end up using our platform to kind of jumpstart that. And then the attorney reviews everything in the Termageddon system. And that's like, in my biased opinion, I feel like that's a best of both worlds type scenario where it's like, okay, we got the foundation set up, but an attorney's there to review everything and kind of check off everything. So
And I will say, when I went through to set up the privacy policies on our own site, we had one that was dated. I saw the laws were changing. I saw some of the headlines. We did have a client who shall remain nameless that received a shakedown letter, and I was like, I better revisit this Termageddon thing with Hans, because we talked years ago about
yeah,
this.
oh yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
you remember. And what I was very surprised was that the policy that Termageddon generated versus the one that we had found from like a free privacy policy generator type of tool, like, I don't know, 15 years ago, just kind of put it there because we were running Google ads at the time and had to have a privacy policy. Yours was like in depth, like it must be 70 pages and, cranked it out in, 20, 30 minutes of answering some questions and finagling with it to much more thorough than what we had.
I think that speaks to the type of industry you're in. You would welcome business from anyone anywhere. Well, that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. But that tends to mean that more privacy laws apply to you than someone that's hyper local, who's blocked traffic from all other areas except their state in which they're located in. They tend to have much easier policies to figure out. But there's, for the people who are like, yeah, I'd accept business anywhere. Well, a lot of laws could apply in that case, and then policies end up
Yeah.
becoming long. I do want to note we are major advocates of don't provide more than you're required to. Just provide exactly what you're required to, nothing more, nothing less, and that's something we're big believers in. Unfortunately, privacy laws require a lot of disclosures, and that's probably why your policy is rather long.
Yeah. Speaking of doing business with anywhere, and I think you nailed it up front, and this was a, eye opener, I think for most people that are starting to turn their heads and take notice of what's going on in this world. Does Termageddon offer any solutions or tools around GDPR? Because I know sometimes companies doing business in the United States, they have people from Europe coming on their site and filling out forms, and a lot of folks, we've had to go down the GDPR rabbit hole a few times for some of our clients who do
Oh yeah.
business internationally. Um, that's a whole nother can of worms.
It is. Yeah, GDPR really although privacy laws existed before GDPR, GDPR was kind of like the breakthrough privacy law that really captured people's attention. And I think one of the big reasons for that was that its broad-reaching nature. So if you're in Europe and you service people in Europe, yeah, you need to comply with GDPR. However, if you're outside of the EU, but you, number one, offer goods or services to residents of the EU, or number two, monitor the behavior of residents of the EU, you are required to comply with GDPR as well. And that was the first time people were like, whoa, wait, this law in a continent that I'm not even located in can apply to me? Yes, it can. And yes, there are enforcements that have been made. It's more rare than the enforcements made against EU companies, but it's still there. There are USA companies that have been fined for noncompliance, for example. GDPR's broad reaching nature is that second variable I shared. Do you monitor or track the behavior of residents of the EU? Well, we
Hmm.
website owners love that type of stuff for analytics purposes, for advertising purposes. Tracking people is not a bad thing. In fact, I argue a lot of people can almost anticipate it. But now with GDPR, you need to not only comply with those laws, but then you also need to make sure you get what's called a legal basis, allowing you to process their data, which is often done through a consent banner, which I'm sure we'll have questions about during today's call. But yeah, GDPR introduced privacy to the world, I feel like, big time.
Does Termageddon address GDPR in any ways?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. We've addressed GDPR since it went into effect in 2018. We also addressed the UK Data Protection Act. So once the UK left the EU, the UK DPA went into effect, which was more or less a mere copy of GDPR, but technically that's a whole other law. So we certainly take those laws into account. I believe Termageddon takes into account just over 120 website related laws, rules, and regulations. Termageddon site, we have a
Wow.
coverage page where we list out everything we cover.
Okay, that's awesome. Where can people find that?
Yeah, go to termageddon.com and click coverage, and you can actually search by policy. So what laws do we get, like consumer protection laws that affect terms and condition statements, or what privacy laws, or you can search by country or and things like that. So there's like nice little search filters because it's a little overwhelming when you look at how many things we cover. We cover what is it called?
Cool.
The ethical responsibilities of licensed attorneys. Like if you're a licensed attorney in Illinois versus Georgia, you have potentially different disclosure requirements that you need to make on your website policies. Our tool takes in
Wow.
all that into account. So there's a lot of goodies on that page.
Yeah, and it sounds like, well, I guess it's a good time to plug the promo code you graciously set up for our listeners to get 10% off your first year or your first month. If you're smart, you'll do the first year. Use promo code business at checkout when you go to termageddon.com and check out their coverage page. Hans graciously offered that up to our listeners so that they can get a little bit of savings. And I really like that you kind of also work with law firms so that like you can let them be sort of the proofreader versus the author. And it'd almost be difficult at this point for and again, I'm not an attorney. I hope I'm not offending any attorneys who may be
Yeah.
listening by referring to some attorneys as "quote unquote" privacy trolls. Everyone in our business is familiar with copyright trolls and where that all kind of comes from. To get your head around this many laws, even in all these different jurisdictions, even different countries, that's got to be a huge challenge. So I have to ask: are you using AI in your business at all to keep tabs on these things or innovate?
Yeah, well, we are proudly not using AI. So we are fully human built. And that's just because, AI well, I guess humans can make a mistake too, but we have a lot more control during our QA process. Like we have to know it
Yeah.
fundamentally. Every law has been read and reread many times. We've gotten on the phone
Hmm.
with, oh man, I can't tell you how many times we've called California for clarification on their own laws. We will call government agencies and even ask them for clarity on their laws when we feel like clarity is deserved. So my wife's also the chair of
That's
the American
understandable.
Bar's e-privacy committee. She was elected to be the representative to the United Nations to help write privacy laws. So we're,
Wow.
we're fully immersed in the privacy industry, for sure. And yeah, to speak on like, how do attorneys keep up with all the changes? I honestly don't know. I wish them the best. It's a full-time job for my wife, and she just helps engineer the software to help make it happen. So it's some tough stuff. It is. It's tough. It's tough.
Well, AI tends to hallucinate and it does make mistakes. So I think when it comes to the legal policies that could end up getting you sued, you don't really want hallucinations happening there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I know we only have a few more minutes. There's a couple other important things that I want to talk to you a little bit about. The first one is we talked a little bit about cookie consent and specifically like where that intersects privacy policies. And I want to make sure we get that in. Before we
Yeah.
go there, though, I want to ask you about another new phenomenon. I recently got an email request to my mind went back to GDPR, right? When I got this request. And I know like with GDPR, and I think maybe with some of the California privacy laws, if a consumer or a person asks you to remove them from your records, especially with GDPR, you have to comply. So I got this weird email. Of course, my natural skeptical nature, being a former detective, I'm like, what kind of new scam is this? And it said, we have reason to believe this person is in your database and they've engaged our law firm to make
Mm.
sure that you remove them from all your records, yada, yada, yada. It was written like a lawyer wrote it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I jump in my CRM, I jump in our newsletter service, I jump in our QuickBooks, I jump in like 5 different places. I'm like, this person doesn't exist anywhere. I have no idea what in the world are they talking about. Have you heard of this one?
I know the vehicle in which this person is pursuing. So, like under CPRA, for example, you have the right to designate an authorized agent to exercise privacy rights. And what that basically means is that you can hire a third party to just go out and have your privacy rights exercised on behalf of a third party. So it sounds like that's the vehicle in which they're doing it. Now, what I don't
That's
know.
exactly what it was.
Okay.
It even had a service on there. I just don't recall off the top of my head. This was literally like within the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
It was, and I went and looked up their website, and it sounded like that's what they do is they go out and try to get you removed from everything. But I'm like, why are they reaching out to this little marketing agency in Pittsburgh that
That's,
this person never
yeah.
dealt with?
Well, that's what I've never heard of that. So I would, was it like intentionally supposed to be threatening to you, or do you think it's maybe they just mistakenly?
No, all they asked was to remove them.
Okay, they weren't asking
And
for, okay.
naturally my mind went to, yeah, they weren't demanding a shakedown of any
Yeah,
kind.
because under
So
CPRA,
naturally I
there is no shakedown option. So
okay. I went to look and they didn't exist. I'm like, what is this? And I think it may have just been they engaged this outfit of sorts to go and scrub them from everywhere. But I was just
yeah.
very surprised that it, like I said, landed in a little marketing agency owner's inbox.
Yeah, boy,
um,
I'm
so
gonna be scratching my head with that. If you don't mind, privately email me like later if you ever get an update
I'll
on that.
share. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's
No,
interesting.
I got back to them. I said, I've checked all of our records. I have no record of
Well done.
your person you're representing. And it said, we're the designated agents, kind of to your effect, something along those lines.
Cool.
If we had more time, I'd pull it up on another screen, but I have a feeling we need to do a follow-up interview anyways, because
I
this
think that
stuff's
sounds
always
great.
changing. And yeah, last thing I want to touch on, we did kind of dabble and tip our toes into the water on this, but cookie consent
Yes.
policies and tools, you know, we've installed the Facebook and LinkedIn Pixel and helped run those campaigns for many clients. And seeing that some of these attorneys are kind of using that as a weapon to demand, I don't know what the right word is. I want to say shakedown, but maybe some of these are legitimate requests, but we'll call them shakedowns for now, for the purpose of this interview. So you get this shakedown that says, hey, you have a Facebook Pixel on your website that you installed 7 years ago for a Facebook ad that you haven't run in 6 years, and we want $20,000 to go away, and then 6 emails later the number's down to $2,000 if you go back and forth with them, right? That's kind of how it plays out. So if someone comes to your site and you just have this privacy policy, that's one thing. The cookie consent policy, from what I've seen and learned about it and have installed it on a few sites, actually gives them the option to say, I do not want to be tracked, and in effect will turn off those pixels. Is that correct?
Oh, that's, yeah, that's right. And privacy laws like SIPA GDPR, UK Data Protection Act, Canada's PIPEDA, Quebec Law 25. There are multiple privacy laws out there where you have to have users opted out by default. So a properly built consent tool will actually block those technologies from firing at all. And only after the user provides what's called explicit consent will, and that's through like someone clicking accept all, will the tool say, this user's consenting. They've given me what's called a legal basis, which is quote unquote, the user's provided consent to the processing of their data and the sharing of their data. And now I will take that data and there I'll let those scripts fire and start tracking the user. So many people wonder why these cookie banners exist. They exist so that the website owner can start collecting data about a website visitor's session as soon as possible. That's why they're there, and that's why they're the first thing you see when you visit these websites. They're trying to get your consent to allow them to understand how you work through the website for analytics purposes. They want to potentially send you advertisements based on what you click on. And so consent banners exist to block technologies from loading and only allow them to load until after consent is obtained. And that is the main essence of these things. Now, with that being said,
Gotcha.
the US is like to mix things up a little bit, and there's quite a few laws in the US where those laws allow the user to be opted in by default, but then a consent banner can exist for you to click deny, and then you're opted out. But the broad-reaching privacy laws, the ones that tend to apply to even small business owners, those tend to be where you need to be opted out by default.
Cool. And that's why I'm a fan of Termageddon, is because, as a marketer, I want to get that conversion data reported back to my ad platform so that we know we're buying the right ads and getting the right people to the website. But we don't want to get our clients embroiled into, some type of lawsuit or that sort of thing. So
anyone, I have to say this, anyone who is a customer of yours is extremely lucky, because I would say the average marketing related business tends to hate us, tends to hate cookie consents. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard marketing companies say cookie consents are not a big deal. You don't really need to worry about this stuff. And oh my gosh, like that it's nails on a chalkboard to me this day and age. And the reason why is because I used to talk like that before I married a privacy attorney and got whipped into shape. So my hat's off to you, seriously, Chris, because the fact that you see that and know that this is something to take that it's important, and okay, we have to accept this to be a part of the marketing rather than thinking to myself, how can I, avoid this entirely? Like you are one of few, and it's awesome to hear that that's your mindset. And so
thanks, man. This podcast isn't about that, but marriage is a great institution. Our wives tend to be our better halves for a reason.
That's true too.
But I want to be respectful of your time. I know you said you had a hard stop coming up. I definitely think we should do another follow-up. Again, anyone who's interested in Termageddon, you can get 10% off by putting in the promo code BUSINESS when you go to checkout. Definitely recommend you apply that to the 1-year deal versus the monthly deal. You get a little bit better discount there. Actually, 10% is 10%. Oh, no, it's only the first payment, though, huh? Yeah, so do the year, and you get the
and that's our little
payment.
thank you.
Definitely do the
That's our little thank you where, we don't spend money on Google because I'm not going to pay Google, the company that got all these privacy regulations put into place. So I try to give it back to the people who are willing to share, the benefits of Termageddon. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here again. Everyone can learn more about Termageddon at termageddon.com. That's TERMAGEDDON.com. We'll include the links in our show notes. We'll have a summary of everything we talked about today, along with some links to a few of the things we shared. If you like the show, love for you to tell a friend and subscribe. Hans, it was great having you. I always love catching up with you. I'll share a little bit about that company that was acting as a authorized agent. Maybe that'll be a good follow-up subject if we start to see a new trend there.
No, for sure. I have seen it like one or two other times. It's rare, but it's cool that you shared that information. That's a really cool example.
Yeah, you never know what 2026 and beyond is going to throw at us. So we'll do it again now and then. Thanks, Hans.
Thanks so much, Chris.
All right.